Thank you all so much for coming to this webinar about reviewing. I'm Jackie Eastman. I'm part of the AMA Higher Ed Special Interest Group. Also, I'm co-editor with Steve D'Alessandro at the Journal of Consumer Behaviour. What we're going to be talking about today is becoming a better reviewer. So we're going to first talk about the benefits of reviewing, both in terms of service as well as in terms of helping us become better researchers. We'll give some suggestions for constructive reviewing, what journals are looking for, handling revisions as a reviewer, and then finish it up. I'll be sending out PowerPoints. These PowerPoints after the end of this session. And as you have questions, please type them in. Our associator, Tafe Yazan Paris, is going to be answering them as we go through. And at the end, before we do questions, Angie Shane will be taking a picture. Okay, when we look at the benefits, all schools are facing increasing pressure. So where it might used to be for Ph.D. granting institutions to really hit those A-star journals, now even balanced schools are feeling more of that pressure. So we're seeing universities across the world pushing for higher quality in research. We're seeing more use of journalists. And so what that's resulted in is that there's been a lot more submissions to journals. And part of the benefit is becoming part of that co-creation nature of publishing. Probably all of us can remember a case where a reviewer gave us very good constructive advice, even if the paper was rejected. I've had cases where the feedback I got was very helpful. I collected more data. I utilized their advice and got it published, sometimes in even a higher level journal, because of that constructive review. And so what's really nice is that, we serve a lot of service roles in academia, but this is the one where you can truly make a difference to the field. And Jason Thatcher, if you follow him on LinkedIn, he had a comment about reviewing in which he said, if you have time to submit, you have time to review. And so there's increasing need for reviewers. And so if you want to submit articles because you're feeling that increasing pressure to publish, it's important to be part of that solution. So again, the benefits for you for service is that, we've all sat on committees where it's basically we're sitting there, and then we could say we are on that committee. This is actually a service activity that you can make an impact on the field. So that's very important. Also, as a researcher, it sort of gives you a peek behind the curtain. How does the process work? And that's very important. And then as you go through the process as a reviewer, you get a feel for what works, what doesn't work. What are the things that as a reviewer and handling when you're getting revisions back are problematic? What are the things and how you can better tell the positioning of your research, how you can better address the concerns? And so by doing that, it makes you a better author. For those people early in your career, you may not have determined, here is my research stream. So you might have a lot of different research interests. As you go through your doctoral program, you might write one paper for one class, and another class, you're writing another paper. Well, when you start looking at different research, This can help you realize where your passion is for research. And finally, there's opportunities for recognition that different journals will have awards, that they'll develop ad hoc reviewers to become editorial review board members. It helps you make connections. And so I know, post-COVID, as we're going back to conferences, it was really nice that I would see somebody's name badge. I'm like, oh, they reviewed for us. And so it was really wonderful to help make those connections. And lastly, you can log in get recognition through Publ. This is important for those of you going up for promotion and tenure, that you can make that case of, here's the work I've done. So here's some suggestions. When you get a review request, respond quickly, even if the answer is no. So you might get a request from a journal and you might just think, okay, I've got 50 student projects I have to grade in the next week. I can't do this. Or you might say, this paper, this isn't really my topic. I don't have an expertise. It's okay to say no. But what we ask is that say no quickly. Because the issue is that if we're waiting for you, we think, okay, you might review for us. And so that pushes the delay, because a week will go by and then we realize, oh, we've got to get another reviewer. And so part of that is that even if the answer is no, I'd rather have a quick no than a delayed. And it might be a paper that fits your area of interest, that you're an expert, but you're like, I can't do this right now. And so it's like, I'm going to need 45 days. Well, let us know. We would rather have 45 days and get someone that's an expert, that we really want to review this paper, that can really offer constructive information for the author. And so if we have to wait, that's fine, but let us know so that we can make a note of it. And so then when the author emails us, what's the status of the paper, we can say, we've given the reviewer extra time. They're an expert. We want to get their input. Also, when you do your reviews, they need to be very factual, constructive, and detailed. It's important for you to both note what's problematic as well as what's good. Because a lot of times people might love a paper and they just say, this is a great paper, and they give us a very brief review, but we don't know what's great about it. So even if you love the paper, it's still important to give us feedback. It's also important to make it factual. So you might read a paper and say, well, if I was on this team, I would have done these things differently. If it's a factual issue that, gee, they should have tested for something else, or gee, there's an issue with their data, or gee, there's an issue with their measures, or they're missing key sources, that's one thing. But if it's just more of an opinion of, gee, I would have done this differently, that might be something more to share with the editor and keep sort of the factual, constructive information for the author. And you also want to talk about each major section. And so there might be a section, say they're using a different methodology than you use. And so you may not feel comfortable on commenting, but you know the topic, great. So you might want to be sure to let the editor know, because if we don't see a lot on the methodology, we don't know if that is because it's fine or it's because they're using a different methodology than you've used. So you need to let us know. And again, keep it constructive. Even if you know, okay, this is a paper that is not going to have a home at this journal, still provide constructive advice. Some reviewers take the approach of, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Oh, I've said enough things wrong, so now I'm going to reject. Well, that doesn't help anybody. Be constructive. Have you thought of this? Maybe you want to run this. Here's my concerns. So that way, even if it's not going to end up at that journal, the authors can take that, improve their research, and find a home for it. And lastly, be professional. Make sure the review's clearly written. I know everyone's pushed for time, but before you click submit, take that one last look to make sure that the writing is well done. Keep in mind, as I mentioned, we have 39 different countries that have registered for this webinar. Journals truly have a worldwide audience. So keep in mind that. And then finally, think about it. What kind of review would you like to see? What kind of feedback would you like to get? We've all had reviews where we think, there's a reason why people have the Facebook group, reviewer 2 must be stopped. And we've all had the ones where, okay, this wasn't exactly what I wanted to hear, but let me sleep on it, look at it the next day. It's like, yeah, they're right. And then you use that to make the paper better. Some other suggestions is sometimes you'll see a paper that will just frustrate you. Save the frustrations for the editor. Particularly, you might have a case with the revision process where you think like, no, they did not make a good faith effort. You point out the concerns to the authors, but you save the anger, tell us that they did not. Or sometimes you'll see authors when they make their response to reviewers that they tend to, sometimes, doesn't happen often, they might delete comments and they think, oh, the reviewer won't remember. Well, every reviewer saves a copy of the reviews they do. So that might be something to discuss with the editor. Also point out your strengths and weaknesses. So, if it's in a methodology that's outside of your expertise, tell us that. And so then we know, okay, the other reviewer is more of a methodological expert. So we're going to, lean a little more on what they say, or we might realize we need to get another reviewer that's more of a methods person. So let us know. The other thing that's vital is you need to see the process through. Nothing is more frustrating for an editor, an associate editor, and the authors is to suddenly lose a reviewer. Because if we have to bring in another reviewer halfway through the process, that's very hard for that reviewer because they're trying to decipher what has already been said and, what issues do they have? And it's very hard for the authors. So see it through. And you might say, okay, now this is the third time I've seen this paper. I don't have time. Focus on, did they address your concerns? If that's all you have time for, that's all you have time for. Ideally, we'd like you to see everything, but I'd rather have somebody say, I didn't have time to see, did they address the other reviewers? I focused on, did they address my concerns? But I didn't check the other reviewers. I'd rather have that than have you drop out of the process. So ultimately, it's about being the kind of reviewer you would want to have read your work. So when we look for, what are we looking for with reviews? Okay, we're looking for quality. Do they show that they understand the manuscript, that they've truly read the manuscript thoroughly? Not just give it a cursory glance, but they've read it, they've understood it. Do they show that they have expertise in either the topic or the method? Does what they tell the authors, does it help them move the research forward? Is it constructive and collegial? Again, Just because you reject a paper doesn't mean you can't do it in a constructive, collegial way. The next thing we want is thoroughness. That does it provide sort of that initial overview of this is what the paper's about? Then does it address all the major sections? And we're looking for at least 100 words per section. Does it point out the good as well as the bad? So it's important if they're doing something right to say, I liked how you did this, or you demonstrated a thorough understanding of the literature, or your methodology was very detailed and I could follow it and done properly. Those are important things for the editorial team to know. Do you offer suggestions for improvement? Do you highlight, here are the major issues? And you communicate it in a way that the editorial team and the authors can follow it. The next issue is timeliness. Do you respond quickly? Do you submit the review by the deadline? And if there's a delay, do you let us know? We know delays can occur. Life happens. This is a volunteer work you're doing, but do you let us know? And then with the revisions, you quickly respond, yes, I'll review the revision, submit it by the deadline. And do you stick through the process? It's critical that you stick through the process. And again, we know delays can occur. Do you communicate those in a timely manner and tell us when you're going to get the review in? Now, when you get, you're on your second review, one of the things you're going to want to look at is, did they make a good faith effort to address your concerns? Part of it may be in reading it, it might be clear that they didn't understand what you wanted them to do. And then if that's the case, then you have to sort of re-explain what you were suggesting. And if they could address it, do they make it clear how they addressed it? Now, sometimes they can't address all your concerns. If that's the case, do they tell you why? Do they provide sound reasoning? Now, part of it could be that in addressing reviewer 1, that's going to conflict with what reviewer 2 asked you to do. So do they explain that? That, it would be a contradiction. Or, and again, this is sometimes when reviews get more an opinion than fact, is it a case of, gee, they're asking you to do these things, but that's a dramatically different paper. So do they make the case? It's important that they do make the case if they can't address your comment. And then lastly, the authors should make it very clear how the paper was improved. They need to summarize the major changes. They also need to make it clear where in the paper the change was made, and were the improvements substantive? Did the improvements make the paper better? A mistake some authors make is that they will make, sort of address the low-hanging issues, very superficial revision. You want to look at, is the paper better? And so you're looking for, was it easy to see where the changes were made? Is the paper a better paper? And sometimes, and this is unfortunate, but it does happen, is that in asking them to provide more details, it becomes clear that there's a problem, particularly with the methodology. So we might say, gee, we need more information about your sample. Then in looking at how they did the sample, okay, that's an issue. Or how did you measure something? So sometimes as we sort of peel away the layers of the onion, it illustrates new concerns. And so you need to communicate that, say, thank you for this additional information, but in having this additional information, it points out a new issue. And so you need to make clear what additional revisions are needed. And again, section by section. So it might be, okay, you've added the extra articles we've asked you to add. no further changes needed to the literature review. Or it might be, okay, the methodology, you've run some additional tests, you've made it clear what you've done. Nope, we don't see any additional changes needed here. But where we do need changes, so again, make it clear what's going well and what's problematic. And so again, what you want to communicate to those authors, if there's no further revisions needed, acknowledge the author's efforts in addressing your concerns. Because again, we all know as authors, it is really hard to do revisions. Sometimes doing the revisions is harder than doing the initial paper. If it's a case of if they don't seem to be understanding what you're asking, clarify what you're asking them to do. If they still need major changes, make that clear. If their case for not making, change is weak, make that clear. And again, sometimes in the revision process, we see a fatal flaw. So again, it might be a case of they're going to need to conduct a whole new study because this study's problematic. Make that clear. And sometimes you might have a paper where it's not that the paper's bad, it's just that it's not at the level needed for an A-level journal. So again, try to say, okay, if you want to hit an A-level journal, this is what you need to do. Or given the concerns that it doesn't make a big enough contribution, you may be better off looking for a different home for it. And then sometimes you'll have that case that they don't listen to what you're saying and they don't make a good case for why they're not listening. And again, just say, here's my concerns that they still have not been addressed, and this is what we would recommend you do. So in conclusion, reviewers need dedicated reviewers that will see the process through. And so we need reviewers, and quality reviews are needed to make sure that quality papers are published that make an impact in the field, that make a contribution to both theory and practice. Reviews are vital in ensuring that is met. And I think pretty much every journal is looking to grow their reviewer base. So if you're interested in consumer behavior, we'd love to have you get involved as a reviewer. If you're interested in other areas of marketing, I would encourage you to reach out, because what journals are trying to do is develop their ad hoc reviewers, with the idea being that they can become editorial review board members. So journals are looking for people that will do multiple reviews over a period of time. They're looking for a variety of topics where someone's an expert, a variety of methodologies that someone's an expert, particularly as journals are now pushing for more multi-study, multi-method kind of research. I would, this is just for an early career scholar, this is a fantastic opportunity to get involved early in your career. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in a journal, email the editor your name, your address, your university, what are your areas of expertise, where have you published. I can tell you how the process works for Journal of Consumer Behavior. What we do for Journal of Consumer Behavior is that when people send me those emails, I add them to my ad hoc list, and that gets sent out every month to my associate editors. And then twice a year, we ask the associate editors to recommend people to be added to the editorial review board. And so this is where the idea of doing multiple reviews, so you're known by that journal that you're a reliable reviewer, will help that progression. I know other journals handle it differently, so When you send that email to the editor, you might say, what is the process of developing reviewers? And we finished this in 25 minutes. And so what I'm going to do is stop share. And if you wouldn't mind turning on your cameras, because I know Angie would like to take a picture of us. So if you wouldn't mind turning on your cameras, that would be fantastic. And so Angie, you tell us when to.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you so much for the insightful session. So yes, please. Everyone smile. One more, sorry. 2 seconds. Smile. Thank you, Jackie. I got 2 beautiful pictures. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can move on with the Q&A session.
Okay. Atape, what questions do we have from the chat?
First of all, Jackie, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. Very, very helpful. Thank you everyone for joining us. We have one question in the chat. What if a reviewer does not like the comments of the other reviewers? In other words, should a reviewer only care about his points in the revision, or he has to also care about how the other authors address the reviewer's point?
Oh, that is a great question.
Great question.
What I would recommend is for the author, focus on, do they address your comments? But to the editor, that portion, make that known if you have issues with what that other reviewer is saying, particularly if you think what that other reviewer is saying is going to send, the author in an incorrect path. So that's something we as editors definitely want to know. But I think in what you say to the author, focus on your comments. Now, if there's things that the other reviewer says is wrong that you think is right, I think you can say, I really liked how you handled this. So I would not say reviewer 2 is wrong, it must be stopped. What I might say is, I really liked how you handled this. And then tell the editor, I think reviewer 2 is wrong and must be stopped. But to the authors, make it clear what they did well, and what you would like them to see to do to enhance the paper.
Wonderful. We have another great question. What are the fatal flaws? Distinguish minor revision and major revision.
I think where we see sort of the biggest issues is, one, if it's not clear where the sample came from, where the data came from. 2, what was measured. So I think the big issue, where'd you get your data? How did you measure it? How did you analyze it? Then I think issues are, did you make it clear how your research contributes? So this is going to be, you have to make that case in the introduction. How are you advancing theory and practice with this research? And so you might have a paper where it's, conducted correctly, but they don't make that strong enough case that this is why it's a contribution. And then also where you see, are there key articles missing in the literature? Have they really crafted this is why we have these hypotheses, and this is what the literature has said in these areas. This is what we think will happen. And then lastly, in that discussion section, and I've seen this too many times, that you can almost read the exhaustion of the authors when it comes to that discussion section. We're just like, let me just type up something. Take a day off and go back to that discussion. Really make the case. What was interesting and novel in what you found? What does that mean for theory? How has theory been moved forward based on your findings And what does it mean for marketers? And then lastly, what does it mean for here's needed areas of future research? So I think those are the type of things that will warrant what kind of a revision or not occurs. And again, lastly, most journals, particularly at the A level, are looking for multi-study, ideally multi-method research. So it might be, there's not that what you did was wrong, there's just not enough to make that level of contribution.
Thank you. We have two questions that are kind of related. First, is there any way for reviewers to see feedback on the quality of their review from the journal or editor? And also, the other question is, what are your thoughts on rewarding reviewers? Many people feel this is a service not worth doing. How would you encourage prospective reviewers to consider reviewing?
Well, I think in terms of the rewards, I would definitely, particularly if you're early in your career, use Publins. So that way, when you go up for promotion and tenure, you can show this contribution. In terms of the quality of the review, our associate editors do rate in terms of timeliness as well as quality. That's sort of an internal we use, and where that comes into is when we have our reviewers of the year, that we ask our associate editors to nominate people, and then when we're trying to decide who gets it, that's when we look at how many reviews were done and what was the level of quality. And that's why if you're going to be late with the review, let them know in advance so you don't get downgraded on timeliness because you've let them know in advance.
Thank you. We have a question about how do you see the future in the review process with the influence of AI?
That's an excellent question. I think, I think for authors, I think it's real clear that, and some journals have come straight out and said, no AI in the paper. As authors, I would discourage, I went to an AI session once and they're like, hey, one of the benefits of AI is you can take your manuscript and submit it through AI and it will help polish and copy edit your paper. And it's like, yes, and now you've just given your original research into a worldwide database where now you have no control over it. I don't really see, at least in the next couple of years, AI replacing the reviewer role, because it's still going to come down to subject experts and methodological experts. Because part of the issue of AI is it only knows what it's given. And so a lot of times AI can spit out something that's totally incorrect. AI doesn't know if it's correct or not. All it's doing is making predictions based on what it's been given. So I think in the short run, I don't see AI impacting the reviewing field because there will always be a need for experts.
Thank you. And there were a couple other questions that have been answered in the chat. So again, I would like to thank everyone for the time. Thank you, Jackie, for this wonderful session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And on behalf of the AMA Higher Ed SIG, I would like to thank you for joining this session by Dr. Eastman, our Vice Chair of Research, and of course, the wonderful editor of JCB. Please get connected with us through our social media and also join the SIG. We encourage you to do so. And don't forget to share your contact information with us if you would like to be considered as an ad hoc reviewer for the journal.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. When you signed up, one of the questions we asked was, would you be willing to serve? If you said no, you're we will not put you on the ad hoc list. Those that have said yes, we will include in the ad hoc list. And again, if you have any questions, let me give you my contact information. I'm also on LinkedIn, and we also have the LinkedIn page for the Journal of Consumer Behavior. We encourage you to follow that. There's a lot of fantastic opportunities coming up in the journal with calls. I would also encourage you to follow the AMA Higher Ed SIG. There's fantastic opportunity. We have a special session coming up with Winter AMA. It can be virtual or in person in beautiful St. Pete, 2 hours up the road from me. That if you have a systematic lit review, we would encourage you to submit to that because the deadline's been extended to October 25th, and you can find that information out on AMA Higher Ed SIG on their LinkedIn page. And thank you all so much for coming, and have a wonderful evening. For most of you, I know it's evening. For those of you that it's still daytime, have a wonderful rest of your day and have a fantastic week. Thank you so much for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Well,
Have a
thank
nice
you.
day.